Hello guys, how's it going? My name is Dalaran, and there are many different interesting combinations when it comes to classes and covenants in Shadowlands. Some of those combinations are really strong and some are not, and one of the things Blizzard wanted to do in patch 9.05 is to buff a bunch of them. And they ended up buffing a lot of the covenants that just weren't nearly as good. Some of the underdog covenants that are just overlooked by many players. I don't think Blizzard wanted to shift the meta by making the strongest covenants weak, but instead what I think they try to do is to allow players that want to play a specific playstyle or specific covenants because they like the playstyle, like the way that the abilities work, to let them play it without completely punishing them with negative DPS. However, some of those smaller adjustments actually have had massive ripple effects, and we're going to be talking about some of the strongest underdog covenants available in the game right now, based on patch 9.05, based on the data of people rolling those covenants and how well they're performing within those covenants. We're going to start this video off with something you guys have heard about before, the Outlaw Rogue Necrolord, a covenant we covered before that was really good for Mythic Plus. It was pretty good for building combo points, since bone spikes, the more of them you had, the more combo points generated. You also could pair it together with Soulbind to give your allies a damage buff in terms of primary stats, and you could use it quite often since this ability had a pretty short cooldown and many charges. While the ability had good synergy and the Covenant had good synergy with groups, it never really worked out too well for rogues. It never really had good damage by itself, and it was just kind of niche in Mythic Pluses, but that's about it. Until Blizzard came in 9.05 and changed it, increases damage significantly, so now this ability can stay on toe-to-toe against other Covenant abilities being much closer. But there was more. They wanted to make this ability more interactable with different rogue specs. Like the Mastery for Assassination that buffs the bleeds, Bone Spike has a bleed, so it now works with their Mastery. And then they made it work with Blade Flurry for Outlaw, since the Kyrian ability already works with Blade Flurry, why won't the Necrolord one as well? Except the damage while Blade Flurrying is actually kind of high, and this ability generates a lot of combo points, which lets you chain finishers, which means a ton of AoE damage. It looks like Necrolord is going quickly from the least played covenant for Outlaw to now one of the best ones for Mythic Pluses, with rogues that are going Necrolord in M+, doing incredibly well in performance. The next combo we have is a Shaman, mostly as enhancement, as well as Night Fae Covenant. Now, none of the Covenants were really all that bad in terms of the Soulbinds for Shamans, especially for Enhance, but the Venthyr ability was the only one that did any considerable damage, so most enhancements went Venthyr. But in 9.05, Blizzard took a look at Enhancement and took a look at the fact that Venthyr is the only solid option because the other abilities for other Covenants don't simply hit as hard. So they went up and buffed the other Covenants altogether. So now the Soulbinds are real close for enhancement, but now are all the abilities, or at least a lot closer than they were, making it a much more competitive choice for enhancements when choosing their Covenant. There are still some Covenants that are a little bit better, a little bit worse depending on playstyle, but one of the ones that really started to shine as of recently is the Night Fae Covenant. It went from a least popular clunky choice to now an actual solid ability, still kinda clunky, but a solid, strong, single target competitor. While the Enhancement Shaman Night Fae ability is a little bit weird one where you have to stand still and channel it, so you can't move and channel it, which does feel awkward for a melee class that's mostly all about mobility. It is still really strong, has a meteor style playstyle like a fire mage that drops down a meteor that splits the damage, but if it hits one target, it's going to be a lot of damage. And that's kind of what they did with the Night Fae ability. This combined together with the Soulbinds of Naya with birds, which are so strong if the boss isn't going anywhere, or maybe Corrin for the Mythic Pluses, which again also is known by most players as one of the strongest Soulbinds for Mythic Pluses in particular, you have yourself a really deadly combo for Enhancement Shaman potential. And you really gotta consider the damage of this ability is quite high now. I mean, even Elemental Shamans are slowly starting to try this Covenant out. While they're not moving to it in droves, and neither really are Enhancement Shamans just yet, there are more people popping up that are really giving it a go and even having success with this Covenant. The buffs to what the ability itself does are really difficult to overlook, and while it may not be your most favorite playstyle, again, I still feel like there are some parts of it that are clunky, like standing still and channeling, but the damage it does is pretty high, where I feel like it could definitely have potential in the future. Next one is going to be Warriors, primarily protection with a little bit of fury, playing out as the Necrolord. Just before patch 9.05, Necrolord were basically down in a gutter for Warriors, never really a considered choice and just not really ever worth it. This ability probably got the biggest makeover of all the abilities in 9.05. No longer is it a long cooldown that does nothing, and now it's a shorter cooldown of 2 minutes that grants you and 2 allies 400 mastery. For protection warriors in particular, this is incredible, as it gives you extra utility to bring into raids or dungeons, especially when you're trying to compete against all these other powerful tanks in the game. Bringing in 400 mastery is significant, especially if you give it to the right class. Imagine 2 fire mages combusting through and through for a boss with 400 extra mastery each. The biggest draw of this ability now will become that it's not your cooldown, it's other people's cooldown, so you really wouldn't synergize this together for others to do well. But as a protection warrior, you're already looking for group gameplay to let your group succeed and be the tank leading the charge. For fury warriors, it can also give you opportunity to become this group player, team player, while still getting a decent benefit from mastery, unlike an arms warrior would. Definitely a awesome story of a covenant going from the worst to one of the more competitive ones with one single change. Not every class in Spec got crazy new covenants for them to play, as Blizzard didn't really want to shake up the meta too much. So this video isn't going to have too many colorful classes in there, as in different class colors. We're going to have a lot of yellows and turns out a lot of blues in this video. Maybe in future patches Blizzard can make a Necrolord Paladin a thing, maybe a Kyrian Priest combo, or any of the other updates in the future. But let's take a look at a prominent one, which is a Venthyr Assassination Rogue. Most of the buffs are going to be from the actual 905 patch, making Assassination a lot more playable with Spec, with a couple legendary changes to make it a really strong choice for pure single target. The Venthyr Covenant has great synergy with the Spec, in particular the haze buff it provides, which works really well with bleeds, where Assassination gets more ticks of bleeds, and the more ticks of bleeds you have, the more energy you have in order to slam more envenoms into the boss. The Venthyr Flagellation ability also saw quite a significant buff, where this buff is actually quite amazing inside of your Vendetta Bursty window for Assassination, so it's an ability that just fits perfectly into the mold of the Spec, and in a sense, it's going to be difficult to untie the Assassination from the Venthyr in the future. Another combo that's shown itself to be quite good in Mythic Pluses is Restoration Shaman as a Venthyr. Restoration Shamans generally play Necrolord Covenant, but just like Enhancement, a lot of the other Covenants saw buffs, so they're at least a little bit closer. While I do believe that Necrolord is still going to be the dominant choice for many Restoration Shamans because of its synergy with the playstyle of Resto, as well as synergy with the legendaries that most Restoration Shamans play, there are now more options for Restoration Shamans to actually pick their Covenants. And one of those combinations that's rising really quickly in Mythic Pluses is the Venthyr Shaman. We all know as Shamans that Venthyr ability is really fun to press. The Chain Harvest. It does a lot of damage and quite a bit of healing as well. We all know it from the Enhancement Shaman, where with Maelstrom it did even more damage and even more healing. And with the buffs that it got in 905, it's actually a solid choice for Restoration Shamans as well. It has big bursty output and synergizes well with a lot of your abilities, especially those that buff healing output. Just think of Chain Harvest as like the biggest chain heal / chain lightning you've ever cast. It ends up being a pretty massive cooldown for Restoration Shamans to use in dungeon and raid situations. And it's starting to pick up a bit more popularity, where quite a lot of restos at the top tier are starting to play the Venthyr. And that's going to be our list of 5 underdog class Covenant, or really rather Spec Covenant combos that we have in this video. However, all these underdogs are going from some of the lesser considered choices to some of the more considered choices, which is always a good thing. I'm a huge fan of the variety of different class Covenant combos we have, and the more of them we have, the better. I think Blizzard should continue buffing some of the Covenants that are lesser played in order to offer players more choices in terms of how they can experience the World of Warcraft. And I cannot wait to see what kind of updates they do for more Covenant stuff in patch 9.1. whenever that'll be available for us to test on PTR or once it's available live. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. I do hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know your thoughts about what are some of your favorite class Covenant combos from some of the buffs that Blizzard brought in from patch 905. If you like the video, go ahead and give it a like and subscribe if you want to see more stuff from this channel. And as always, I'll see all of you guys in another video.